Right. Good evening to those in Australia. Good morning to those in the UK. It's Friday, the 12th of June, and this is a Tilt webinar with Chris Harte, Beyond the Languages Classroom with Google Tools. I'm Helen Myers, I'm chair of the London branch. We always thank Heike Philp, who helped us to put things together to do with Zoom, and Linguascope, who give us lots of support. And we have Joe Dale in the room. Joe, introduce yourself and tell us.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Helen. So welcome everybody to the Tilt webinar for today on a Friday morning with the amazing Chris Harte, who I'll introduce properly in a moment. And so, yeah, I'm an independent languages consultant. I'm now making a living from running training on via webinars as opposed to face-to-face. And in the chat, as normal, I've put in a link to 18 example sessions if you'd be interested in either coming along to a session as an individual or asking your department to book me for a training session as well. This one is completely free. The Tilt webinar is completely free, but I have to make a living at the same time. So if you'd like me to come along and do a session either in Australia or in the UK, let me know. Have a look at those sessions. If there's anything that appeals, let me know and I can arrange a time and do a session for you. But it's absolutely lovely to be here and I can't wait for this session to start because I know that Chris is going to share lots of amazing things which everyone's going to go wow in the chat, I'm sure. So let's crack on if that's okay.
Okay, so please write in the chat now if you are a member of ALL and encourage people to join. It'd be great if you're not a member, please join. And in fact, there is I don't think I've put it in there. There's a 10% discount if you put in the words webinar 10, webinar 10, and you can put that in, you get 10% off, and it really would be great to welcome you. I've got a message here about where this is all going to be stored afterwards. So there'll be a page on ALL London where you'll have a link to recording, which Joe Dale hosts, and there'll also be anything else like the chat, and we'll take a photo of us all at the end, and that's where it'll be. Coming soon, we have got other things as well, but on June the 20th, on a Saturday, we've got the ALL London June event. It was due to be in l'Institut Français. They were going to host us in South Kensington. We were so looking forward to it, but we're going to do it online. So we've got still the same speakers we were going to have, so Dr. Rachel Hawkes, Wendy Adeniji, and Nadine Chadier. So we're going to be doing them one after the other. You can see all three. It is going to be live. It's not going to be recorded. We wanted to make it as close as possible to the experience, which is where no one's having to stress about whether or not something's being recorded or what they're saying or anything like that. So, you know, it'd be lovely if you could come along. We've already got, I think, about 300 people who've signed up. We've got room for 500. So it'd be great to see you. Whether you're in Zoom or on YouTube, just a reminder about our etiquette, that we aim to be professional and kind at all times. We never rant. And a disclaimer is that we're very happy to host speakers and participants free of charge, but they are responsible for what they say. Over to Joe.
Lovely. So it's my absolute pleasure, my genuine pleasure to introduce Chris Harte, who I've known for many years. I think we probably connected with each other over, I don't know, 12 years ago when I saw a very fresh face, Chris Harte, appearing on Teachers TV. I'm sure you remember that, Chris, I think in your first year of teaching. And then we met face to face shortly after that. I've been a big fan of Chris's for many, many years, and he's now been in Australia for 8.5 years. So it's really lovely that he could take part in this webinar today. And I'm particularly excited about what he's going to be talking about, which is using Google tools, but particularly ideas around Google Tour Creator, around Google Street View and MyMaps, and particularly focusing on how they can be used in the languages classroom, in the remote languages classroom. So we've been seeing lots of things on Twitter recently around virtual adventures and around Bitmoji classrooms and things like that. And I'm loving, and escape rooms, and I'm loving how this session is going to create some more creative opportunities. I'm sure that people on Twitter will be following suit in the next couple of weeks and creating some fantastic, interesting tour creators focusing on languages for promoting intercultural understanding and speaking listening skills in particular. So over to you, Chris. Thank you ever so much for agreeing to do this, and I can't wait to get started.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Joe and Helen. Oh, I think you're muted, Helen.
It's a bit ironic. I was actually asking, do you want us to mute ourselves and take our videos off? I'd muted myself while I was saying it, but
I don't mind. You can
all
do
right.
whatever you
Okay,
want to
that's
do.
fine.
Joe, there's one point where I do want to share some audio. So I'm just clicking on share.
Yeah, so when you click share, on the left-hand side, it says share computer sound or share computer audio on the left-hand side, once you've clicked on the share button. If you click on the share button now, on the left-hand side, So you click on the share button, and then before you click share, you click on the share screen button.
Yeah.
So you click on the share screen button.
This is my CPD now, right? I'm just learning.
So you click on the share screen button. Before you click share, on the left-hand side of that window, it says share computer sound or share computer audio.
I'm not seeing that, but okay. That's all right. We'll manage. It's either doing it must be doing it automatically or it's not.
It'll be fine. If we can't hear the audio, we'll have a look again, but that should be there. Don't worry.
All right, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully you can see a little poll up on the screen as it loads. Can you see that, Joe?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. So if you want to, I mean, definitely don't have to, but while I give a little bit of a preamble, if you want to jump onto polev.com/ChrisHart953, I've just got a little kind of question for us is why teach languages? Like literally, what's the point? And I think getting paid lots of money is probably not an answer. I think that, I'd love to hear from you why you teach languages, why you chose to teach languages. So while you're doing that, I'll just kind of really briefly introduce myself from the perspective of what feels like another life. I think I've just got, is one person unmuted or is it me? It feels like another life, which was about 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago when I left the UK to come here to Australia. Before that, I was very active in MFL, and we don't call it MFL in Australia. It gets called languages, or it gets called LOT, which is a language other than English. But I was heavily involved in MFL and really loved being involved in Twitter in the early days with you lot, and especially people who were, Rosemary and Helen and Joe and Isabel and bunches of other people who were just really passionate and using Twitter to share so passionately, which was absolutely wonderful. Oh, we have an answer, which is good, so I can stop rambling. But it just really made me happy to when Joe reached out on Twitter and said, do you mind kind of jumping on and sharing a bit around some of the work that you're doing right now? But let's have a look what you have to say, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the work I'm doing in a second. But why do we teach languages? To get to know the cultures, broaden your mind. It's important to share my love, to share your love of language, to help people discover, to share and promote culture and strengthen students for their future opportunities. Fabulous, these are wonderful. Teach young people about other cultures, which in turn teaches them, I've lost where that went to, them to be more appreciative and accepting of people from different from them. Share your love of language and the cultural, broaden your mind because it is fun. Great. And who would get on a Friday morning CPD session because you're passionate about this? I can tell from what you've written. Awesome. So I might come back to them a little bit later on, but I'm going to move through onto the rest of the kind of webinar this afternoon. I've got a few slides which I'm going to share. I've shared a link to these slides in the chat. I noticed that a bunch of you have already jumped on, which is wonderful. And the reason I've shared the slides is because they have got a bunch of hyperlinks in them which you can kind of click on and follow along as we go on a few different pieces. But the focus of today is really about beyond the languages classroom with Google tools. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about that in a second, but something that's really important to us here in Australia, and Australia is definitely a place that I hold very close to my heart, as well as obviously the northeast of England, which is, God's own country, but I do hold Australia close to my heart. And one of the important things which I really appreciate in Australia is whenever we do anything formal, like a presentation or a meeting, then we do something called an acknowledgement of country. Now, because I'm not an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander man, I can't welcome people to country because it's not my country, it's my adopted country. But what I can do is acknowledge country. So even though we're meeting online and we're kind of meeting on lots of different lands, I happen to be down here in Melbourne, is I do want to take this time to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and to recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. And I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and invite you to do the same. This is an important time to remember the immense value Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders bring to Australia and to proactively step up to say their lives matter. I also want to thank all of you who've come along this morning to come together in the most human and traditional of ways in peace to share knowledge and to learn from one another. So thank you for letting me acknowledge country and acknowledge the traditional custodians of this beautiful land, which is Australia. In terms of the kind of who I am, and the most important stuff you need to know about me is that I look 64% like Elkanah Watson, who, as you all know, was a visionary traveler and writer, agriculturist and canal promoter, banker and businessman. I know this because I use the excellent arts and culture app from Google on my phone. And what happens is you take a photo or a selfie on your phone in the app, and it scans that using machine learning against 200,000 and plus now, actually it's more now, 200,000 portraits to find portraits that look a bit like you. So this one is apparently 64% like me. And I think when I looked at it, I was thinking, you know, gray hair, big nose, double chin. It was pretty much spot on. So that's probably the most important thing you need to know about me. The second most important thing, I guess, is I was a French and Spanish teacher in England, in a school in Sunderland for a good while, and then head of department and assistant head at Cramlington Learning Village, just north of Newcastle. And passionate about languages and passionate about the role of technology to really deepen understanding of languages. And then I moved to Australia, and although I still taught French, my main role was around as a kind of assistant principal looking at personalizing learning and pedagogy and technology and things like that. And then I set up, as part with the school I was working with in Australia, John Monash Science School, I set up the Victorian, what's called Emerging Sciences Victoria, which is an online science school. And that was in 2013-14. And essentially it's an online school with astrophysics, nanophysics, things like, what else do we have? Tons of interesting things. All of them have fallen out of my head right now. But a bunch of these really interesting, wonderful subjects which rural and regional kids couldn't access. So we ran them online using G Suite, so Google Apps at the time, and using video. And again, this was quite a number of years ago now, and this is still going. So there's about 230, 240 students each semester enrolled. And when I say rural and regional, all of you lot sitting in the UK who maybe haven't been to Australia will be thinking, what do you mean rural and regional? And we sometimes, and I'm going to show you actually, I sometimes forget how big Australia is. And even my own state, which is Victoria, is probably a little bit bigger than the UK, and very, very a rural area. So that was my background. And then I started doing a lot of work for Google in terms of professional learning around how we'd set up this virtual school. And then I set out, much like Joe, I followed in his footsteps and set out on my own as Unstuck Learning Design. And now I work with lots of different schools and organizations, some universities as well, and do really fun stuff around technology. And the one regret I have is that I only do a little bit around languages nowadays, which does make me a little bit sad. But I do a bit, but not as much as I would like. So that is me, and that's what, I guess why I'm here today is just to share what I do. I'm not saying it's brilliant, but it's the kind of stuff that I think helps students I've worked with learn more effectively, and hopefully it'll be applicable to your kids as well. So the outcome for us today is to explore some of those Google Geo tools in particular and their application to language learning. What I should have said is I'm also a Google Certified Innovator and also on the advisory board for Google Geo, for Google Earth. So this is why I have this kind of passion around, particularly around some of the geo stuff. In terms of the learning outcomes for this session, I've split them. This is a split screen approach. So hopefully you will learn some stuff in terms of knowledge set, but maybe I'm going to ask you to practice some mindsets and some skill sets and some tool sets. In terms of knowledge, you'll have reflected a little bit of the why in our language learning design. We're going to look at that in a second, and then have some strategies for using Google technologies to enhance language learning. In terms of mindset, a growth mindset would be awesome. I'm going to show you some technology things, and some of them you'll be like, yeah, nailed it, easy, I can do that. Some of them you might think, oh, I'm not sure how to do that, or I can't do that. And all I'm going to say is, you've got the recording, you can go back, have a play around. You can always reach out to me. My Twitter handle, I'm going to put that back up again later on. I'll drop you an email, and I'm always happy to help. So having that growth mindset, that whatever I show you, you can definitely have a crack at it. Thinking like a designer, like a learning designer. So thinking about, as a teacher, it's easy to walk into a room and command. It's not easy, that's a lie. It's what we can do is walk into a room and command 30 students with our charm and wit. It's a lot harder to do that in the online space. And in fact, we need to be much closer to designers and thinking about what are the students doing at this point, because I am not physically in a space with them to corral them. Also think like a linguist, but also have a mindset around culture and language and culture. And it was great to see so many of you mention culture there. And the skill set around communication and reflection. So lots of communication in the chat, which actually I've just realized I need to click on this button to bring the chat up on my other screen so I can see it. And Joe, you're going to like tell me and stuff if there are things in the chat. Awesome. And then the tool sets, we're going to look at Google Maps, Google MyMaps, Google Earth, and Google Tour Creator. But the most important tool you're going to bring with you and practice using today is your brain. Okay, so what I'm showing you is works for me, and you know, I think I love it, but you need to use your brain to analyze it, to look at it and think, is this going to work for the kids that I work with? So a quick provocation, I said, around why do we teach languages? And we looked at that. There's a lot about culture. There's a lot about passion for languages. We want kids to develop those skills for communication. So all of these brilliant things that you talked about. And what I'm really interested in is this. I love this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. Learning a foreign language and the culture that goes with it is one of the most useful things we can do to broaden the empathy and imaginative sympathy and cultural outlook of children. Now, you would imagine that would be a quote that Helen or Joe or someone like that might say, but in fact, it was Michael Gove. So well done, Michael. You definitely got this one right. And it is a really, I actually do love this quote, and although I might not always agree with some of the politics, and we're not going to get into politics today, but the actual sentiment here is so important. If we can help students to understand that learning a foreign language isn't just about learning the grammar, and it isn't just about learning to say these set phrases and this kind of thing, which I know you all, isn't what you're doing, but that it is about developing culture, it is about developing communication, because in fact, I think the only way that we can heal our world, which isn't doing so well at the moment, is to develop those really strong senses of empathy and that really strong intercultural understanding. And so what I want to do is just really quickly, just for a couple of minutes before we get into some technical nerdy stuff, is just to look really at the OECD Global Competence, which is one of those really interesting areas to think about when we think about this idea of what do we do in languages? Do we just teach kids to order food or talk about their daily routine, or do we do other things? And I think when I look at this, it really makes me think, I think this actually really encapsulates what we can do in language learning, and what we can do, and indeed to an extent what we should be doing with our young people through our languages curriculum. And I love these, I love all of them, but there are some of them which I think are so important to us: engaging in open, appropriate, and effective interactions across cultures, understanding and appreciating the perspectives and worldviews of others. I think these two are so important within languages, but I also think we've got such an opportunity to examine local, global, and intercultural issues. Now, my son, my wife is French, and so Mathieu is bilingual. I'm going to call him a lazy bilingual. So there's a lot of franglais in the house, and I grabbed his French textbook. So it is Tricolore 4 Total. So I grabbed his French textbook, and he's in year 10 now. Is that right? Yeah, he's in year 10 in Australia, which I think is year 11 in England. And so I was flicking through this, and I was flicking through the different chapters. And unit 1 is Jeune sans frontières, je me présente. I was like, I'm sure he's done that in year 7, if not before. And then talking about family, and I was like, I thought you did that in year 7 as well. And then en ville et à la campagne. And I was like, okay, so that's interesting. We're going to go and have a look around public transport. That could be cool. And then there's going on holidays, and then there's a typical week describing your school day. Then some stuff about food. Then unit 6 is going on about leisure and sport and games. I thought you did that in year 8, but that's okay. We're coming back to it. And then going on hotels and holidays, and then a little bit about health and injuries, and then a little bit about projet d'avenir, what you're going to do in the future. And then suddenly unit 10, which, as we know, by the way, because the curriculum is so full, no one ever gets to unit 10, is Notre Planète. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. It's got like les problèmes du monde, le changement climatique, la circulation, la pollution, le transport. And I thought, wow, now that looks really interesting to me. And ironically, as I say, it's unit 10, which is probably the unit that everyone drops off the end of their schemes of work because we run out of time. So it makes me wonder, like, this examining local, global, and intercultural issues and taking action for collective well-being and sustainable development, can that be core to our languages curriculum? And so what I want to do is just explore a few of those kind of aspects through these Google tools. But what I want to quickly share with you is, and I want you to do some self-assessment. So I'm just going to pull it up for us here. What I've done is I've just written a rubric around intercultural understanding. So I just want you to have a little look at this. And the way this rubric works, and I've got bunches of these, I've got some language focused ones as well, but this is written with the Solo taxonomy, which those of you who remember how much I went on about the Solo taxonomy in the mid-2000s. This is written with the Solo taxonomy, and it's all about intercultural understanding. I seek to learn about and engage with diverse cultures in ways that recognize commonalities and differences, create connections with others, and cultivate mutual respect. If you're at the ready level, it's like you don't see the value in learning with and about diverse cultures. If you're up here in the connect level, you see when I work with others, I explore the commonalities and difference between our cultures, which helps me build connections in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Now, Amy, this Solo taxonomy, S-O-L-O, it stands for the structure of observed learning outcomes, and all it is it's just like a rubric. These little gray blocks here are if you self-assess at this ready level, then if you do this one thing here, it'll help you to move up to the next level. And if you self-assess at this level, if you do this one thing here, it'll help you move up to the next level. So just for a second, and I'm not going to ask you to put it into the chat at all, I'm just going to, this is just for you, is just have a little look at that and just reflect on your own level of intercultural understanding. While you do that, I'm just going to sip my very intercultural beer here. So where are you sitting? Are you sitting down here? Are you sitting up here? Are you sitting around here? And all of these challenging things that are happening in the world right now, I genuinely believe this, and I'm not saying this because I am a language teacher. I genuinely believe that languages teaching is one way for us to really heal some of those divisions, to explore language and culture and to intercultural understanding and mutual respect. All right, so let's keep going. I do have another quote for you, which I do love. This is not from a British politician, but from an American novelist. Rita Mae Brown says, language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they are going. And I just love that. And I think if we took on that responsibility as language teachers to think that we are the guardians of these roadmaps and we're here to share them with our young people. So quick question, where does our curriculum come from? And what I'm going to do is just give us a couple of little challenges here and say, well, absolutely, there is published curriculum and that's designed curriculum. It might be different to the experienced curriculum, but it's there. But what are the challenges to this curriculum? What are the challenges to the kind of content that we teach within languages? I do know I'm giving lots of French examples, by the way. I don't apologize at all for that, but I'm just acknowledging that. This is the space I feel comfortable in, but I do know from teaching Spanish and from my colleagues who teach other languages that there are similar challenges in those languages. I think the on ville, so the around town, and this is something that Joe asked me to share a little bit about, the around town topic has kind of been killed by Google Maps now, and there's some really exciting things that we can do with that. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to go into a not full screen mode, hopefully, and I'm going to go into Google Maps. And as you have probably all used Google Maps, well, not recently, not in the last few months, but let's think back to last year. I'm sure you did. This whole piece around Google Maps, and you're able to change it, which is really nice. And you're able to do directions and give directions in Google Maps. I'm going to explore a little bit more actually MyMaps, more than Google Maps. But one thing which is always worth knowing, especially if you're revising things like names of countries, for example. We've gone all the way out here. It's a little bit too far. If you're revising the names of countries, for example, then it is actually really easy to change the language, the native language within Google Maps as well. So let me just get rid of this path. Let me just pull it out a little bit further here. It's just loading, taking this time. The real-time cloud data is slowing me down a little bit, I think. I did have some issues with my internet today. I didn't want to tell Joe and Helen that in case they got nervous. But hopefully it'll be fine. And I do have a second computer set up, hotspotting off my phone if it isn't fine. But what we can do is, we sometimes miss this, is that on the hamburger menu, so these three little bars here, is we can hit that hamburger menu and we can come down and we can change the language into whatever we want. So let's put it into Spanish for a little change. And that's actually going to it doesn't change my system level language, so the rest of the system remains English, but I've changed the map language to Spanish now. So now I have all the Spanish names for the countries, which is awesome. And also, if let's go into Sagrada Familia. Let's have a little look at the Sagrada Familia. Now, if I wanted to get, I don't want to spoil the excitement of 3D, which I might be doing right now. If I get from the Sagrada Familia and I want to go to the Hotel Sagrada Familia, I can click on Cómo llegar to get directions. And now I have got my, where should we go from? Let's go from Madrid, somewhere in Madrid. And we're going to leave now. And then we're going to take the A2 and the P2. Click on that one, and we can click on the details. And it's actually going to tell me in Spanish, continue, turn right, use whatever carriage you want, and so whichever lane you want, I should say. So I can actually get directions in languages as well. So it just makes it a little bit more realistic than that whole piece of, you met someone in the town and you want to get to the post office and tourner à droite, tourner à gauche, aller tout droit, etc., etc. So we can really quickly change the languages of Google Maps, which is really really nice. And also, I think that the most important thing about what we're going to do today, in lots of ways, is to explore our world and how beautiful it is and how amazing it is and how we need to look after it. And we can do it through the languages that we teach. So what I'm going to do is just go back and show you the other thing that has been killed. Now I'm going to try this. It might, hopefully it will work, and hopefully it'll pop up on your screen and let me know. This is the bit where I really needed the audio to be coming through. But if anyone, the speaking test, which is obviously the thing we love most as language teachers, is to bring young people into a room and then interrogate them terrifyingly about personal details, which they really don't want to share with us. And not only do we do that, but we make them do it in another language. So the idea of the speaking test and the is, that ability to speak. And I remember in 2000, must have been like 2004, 2005, when Google Translate was kind of coming to the front. I always said to my kids, it's really, if you want to look up a word, Google Translate's not the end of the world, but you can find a word, but don't use Translate. Don't use Google Translate. It's terrible. It's going to, all the idioms, you're going to ask it to say like it's raining cats and dogs, and it's just not going to understand. And so the whole thing around Google Translate, the biggest challenge, I think, to languages teachers is that Google Translate is bloody brilliant. It's actually really, really good now. And if the function of it is to help you be understood, it's actually fantastic. If it's to be perfectly idiomatically correct and literary, maybe not so much. But what I'm going to show you is you don't even need to go onto the Google Translate site nowadays. Now I'm using a Chromebook, which you may not have, but you can do this on your phone if you've got Google Assistant. I'm pretty sure Siri does it as well, but I'm not sure she does it quite as well. But if I've got Google Assistant, I can go beyond just asking Google Assistant to be my translator, but actually to be my interpreter. So we're going to go live and see how it goes. Hey Google, be my interpreter. French. Hi, my name is Chris. This morning I got up at 7 a.m. I then brushed my hair. I then got dressed. I then had my breakfast. I then went to school. I liked my lessons. French was the best. I then went home. I watched TV, and then I went to bed. So indeed, I don't know, could you hear the audio there? I'm not sure if you could hear it.
Yes, we could, Chris. Oh, sorry, we could hear your audio, but we couldn't hear the audio. Would you mean it was playing back?
Okay, so she was actually speaking back to me in a beautiful
Yeah, we
French
couldn't hear that, unfortunately.
as well as translating. So suddenly you're kind of thinking, oh, that's a challenge, because in fact that verbal and really rapid and actually pretty accurate, pretty good translation. If some of my year 10 students had have come back with that, I would have been pretty happy. It does really start to challenge our role as languages teachers. And so we start to think maybe a little bit more about just the, what are we doing beyond teaching languages, and also for our relevance. And when I first started teaching languages in 2000, we got paid a little bit of money to train because there was a lack of languages teachers, and languages is really high up in the priority of things. And so how do we ensure we remain relevant, I guess, as languages teachers? And I'm not one of those people who wants languages to be only in service to other things, but I am interested in those cross-curricular connections. And so when we were talking about directions and things, I thought I would share this with you, which is
Chris, before you go on to the next bit, would it be possible just to clarify what you did just then, just because we've got a few people in the chat, as well as myself, actually, Frank, just to be absolutely clear on how you did what you just showed us?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. So I'm not going to say the trigger word right now because it will trigger my my computer.
Okay.
But literally all I did, in fact, I'll do it again. So, hey, Google, please be my interpreter. That's it.
Right. So to enable that, what do you need to do?
So if it's on a Chromebook, it's already built in. Otherwise, it would be on a mobile device, like on your telephone. If you go onto and say, hey, Google, into your telephone. So he's doing it again. That's why I didn't want to say the trigger word.
So is that the Google Assistant that you've enabled, or is that just the microphone within? Can you do that within the Chrome browser on a Windows PC, for example?
I'm not sure you can within a Windows PC. I've shown you on the Chromebook because I wanted you to be able to see it. But in fact, the way I would use it much more often is through my telephone.
Okay.
Is actually, and that again would be the same trigger word, which I'm not going to say.
No.
The same trigger word, and then be my interpreter, and it sets up this interpret interface where I start speaking, or it asks me which language, then I start speaking that language. It'll translate it, and if I'm with someone, I can hold my phone, and I can in between the two of us, and when they speak back to me in French or speak back to me into whatever language, it will then translate back into English. So one of the use cases I saw recently was. If you know what Google Home is one of those kind of devices. It was actually a Nest Hub, which has a screen on it. And someone in a hotel, they've got it on the hotel reception. They come up and they want to book a room, and they speak Spanish, and they're like, oh, hey, I won't say it, but please, blah blah blah, be my interpreter. And then they start ordering their room. They start trying to book a room, and so it speaks back and forward. So it's almost like if you think Star Trek Universal Translator. It's probably about as close as we can get to that. And that's
right. So on your phone, are you launching Google Assistant, or is it the microphone in the Chrome browser?
So on the phone, I'm just using the trigger word. So the phone's always listening for me to say, "Hey Google."
Right. Okay. I see. Okay. So as long as the microphone is been enabled in Chrome or in Google, you can just say, "Hey," etc., and then it will allow you to then translate. Yeah.
Yes, and and I can see Steve's just downloaded the Google Assistant app on his iPhone. So yes, absolutely, it'll work on your iPhone.
Someone also just said that you saying "Hey Google" enabled theirs to start. So that's the effect. Somebody in Australia saying that. I mean, it's this butterfly effect, is it? I don't know.
I think it is. It's terrifying, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you, Chris, for clarifying. That's brilliant. Thank you.
No worries. I mean, it is in the mobile version of the Google Translate app as well, is you can select interpret. So if you've got the Google Translate app on your phone, there is the mode, and you can, because actually that's another way to get to it, Joe, without using Assistant, is to go into the Google Translate app and to select conversation. I think it says conversation or interpret. But I mean, it's just interesting because it's fantastic. And it's but it does challenge us, right? If technology is so good at doing that, then what other things are we helping our kids to develop? One of the things I was going to show you is when I applied for my job in Australia, I lied a tiny little bit. I would like to say, rather than lied, I just applied a growth mindset. And they asked me, could I code? Because there wasn't enough French to be taught. I needed to teach some coding, and say, could I code? And I said, not yet. But by the time I get to Australia, I'm sure I can. So I had to learn to code in Scratch. And what occurred to me is Scratch is this thing that they use a lot in primary schools and into maybe lower secondary as well, is that it's block-based coding. So all block-based coding does is get you to give a set of instructions to the computer, and it'll do some stuff. So I've just quickly done this one here, which I can show you. Is now you're going to ask me what the hell is he talking about? This isn't languages, but you'll see in a second. This is all free, by the way. It's all online and free. Can you hear the baby crying? Sorry. This is block-based coding, and so I've set up some code which says when the green flag is clicked, put the pen down, set the color to purple, forever repeat these things, move 50 steps, turn 90 degrees, and change your pen color. Don't worry about these two things. If on the edge bounce and move 10 steps. And what that's essentially going to do is it's going to tell this cat over here, I've asked him to move 50 steps and then turn 90 degrees and then change the color of his pen, then move 50 steps, turn 90 degrees, change the color of his pen. Now you mathematicians in there will be looking at thinking, he's going to draw a square with different sides colors. And you're like, yes, indeed he is. Now this is awesome, but what's even more awesome is that if I click on the little globe up here, then I have the option to put this into different languages. So if you imagine that we are doing directions or colors, or we want to do something a bit more interesting in terms of interactions and conversations and things like that, is suddenly I've got all of this in French. And so I've got movement in here, I've got appearance, which is all about different costumes, I've got sound, which I'll show you in a second. But I've also got events. And so kids are learning this in primary school. So kids have been doing, and I know are doing this in primary STEM and computer lessons. So why not do it in French, right? So, quand le drapeau va être cliqué, stylo en position d'écriture, mettre la couleur du stylo à violet, répéter indéfiniment, répéter 4 fois, avancer de 50 pas, tourner de 90 degrés. And so if I hit this now, what he should do is draw some multicolored squares. And so not only am I doing French and maths, but I'm also doing art. That's what I'm going to say. This is some abstract art. And one of the really awesome things within Scratch, which I know isn't a Google product, by the way, but I thought I would share this with you, is that I can also do things like I can get him to say things. So if I just pop that into here, he's now going to start spinning around, and then he'll say bonjour, and then he'll go and draw another square in a second, and he'll say it for 2 seconds. Or I can click on sound, and I can actually get him to say things. I can also add in different characters and backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. So I can click on, so I just did that. I don't know if you heard that. I'm probably not sending my sound to you, but I can enregistrer. So I can actually record my voice in Scratch. Bonjour, je suis le chat. And then I can sauvegarder. And now that will appear when I'm back in my code as an option. I didn't name it, I should have named it, it's recording too. And it will actually now say those things for me. So I'm going to get him to stop because it's not getting on my nerves. Actually, we can go for that cross-curricular aspect, and there are a bunch of languages in here as well. I know we haven't got just French speakers and Spanish speakers and stuff, but there are an absolute bunch of languages in here and available. I'm just very nervous to click on some of them in case I get lost. Including Bahasa Indonesia, which I didn't notice we have an Indonesian colleague in here, which is awesome. Great to see you. So I just thought I'd show you, when we're talking about, it doesn't just have to be language. It can be about coding and mathematics, which this one is, and even about art or getting cats to talk. So I'm very aware of the time, so I'm just going to keep going. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat, but it looks okay.
We've got a question here, Chris, sorry, from
Yes.
Amy, saying, can you filter what is said in Scratch from what you've just shown us? Just worried about teenagers getting carried away, she's written.
Can I filter? I have never ever been able to filter a teenager in my life. I'm not sure, I'm not 100% sure the technology is going to let me filter them.
Okay.
I don't know. Are you suggesting a swear word filter? I doubt.
I presume so. I presume that's what Amy means. Yeah.
I doubt.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, that's what she means. Yeah, is that possible?
I honestly don't know. I don't know if there's a swear word. I don't want to try on a live recorded webinar.
No, sure, of course. That's fine.
Just in case, but I think that it's a great point though, Amy. And I think, one of those things around behavior and about kids messing about, which you get in Google Docs all the time, as soon as they understand that they can collaborate in Google Docs, is, you'll have someone put in a stupid comment and then delete it. I always show people revision history, I always show kids revision history. So everything you do online is recorded there. And then we have to deal with that behavior. Unfortunately, we can't always count on the technology to manage the student's behavior. All right. So let me just jump on to the next slide here. And I'm keeping it, if it's okay, I'm keeping it in this view because these are all hyperlinks. Sorry, that's what I meant to say, is that this has got a hyperlink on it, this picture. And if it'll take you down here, if you notice a little pop-up will appear and it'll take you to the Scratch project editor. This hyperlink here, which as I'm sure a lot of you know, this is the 2030 global goals, which 192 countries signed up to say that by 2030 we would meet these goals: no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, etc., etc., etc. There's a bunch of them in there. And when we're thinking about the languages curriculum, maybe we can also go beyond just the stuff that we have in those textbooks and look at stuff like this. Because if I click on this link here, you'll see there's a link appears down here. If I click on that, it's going to open up something called the world's largest lesson, which is a bunch of resources by goal. If I roll into the goals and maybe I click on something like something very important at the moment, well, always important, but it's definitely in the news at the moment, reducing inequality. If I click on that, reduced inequalities, it'll take me to the resource pages. And so there are bunches of resources, lesson plans, posters, texts and things about inequality in here. But then the cool thing again is, because this is a global partnership, is I can choose by languages. Now, there's not as many languages in this one. There's still a bunch of them in there, and Bahasa Indonesia is still there, and Deutsch, Espanol, Francais. And if I go into Francais, so there are more languages. They don't have everything, but they do have a lot of stuff already, and they're continuing to translate the resources as far as I'm aware. So now I've got a really awesome text about égalité, linked to those sustainable development goals. And I'm sure that if you look around school, and I just noticed the chat and talking about the new curriculum in Wales from Emma, is that those cross-curriculum links. I think it's so powerful to be able to say to kids, well, yeah, you're learning French or Spanish or Arabic or Bahasa Indonesia or whatever you're learning, but you're also learning about sustainable development goals. You're also helping to improve our world, right? So I think there's some real power in using those different things. And one of the pieces I want to get to now, so again, I'm not spending lots of time on this. This is for you to go and explore. One of the things I'm really passionate about is this idea of, okay, so, well, how can we use the tools, and Google in particular is my bag. How can we use the tools to explore and to build this language learning in real context? So one of the things I want to really quickly show you is Google Arts and Culture. So Google Arts and Culture, I think someone, all right, great, thanks, Joe. Google Culture is Google's attempt. I realized I didn't hyperlink that one, so I'll do it right now. Is Google's attempt to essentially organize. So the original mission of Google was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible, i.e. as a search engine. But what they've gone on to do now, so here's a quick tip for you. If you want to do a hyperlink in Google anything really, is just Control K. Well, there's a shortcut for hyperlink. There you go, apply. And that'll open up Google Arts and Culture. And what they've tried to do is to actually capture all of these cultural artifacts. Now, one of the problems with Google Arts and Culture, and a good friend of mine, Anna Kamaz, is indeed one of the works on this. And I was chatting to her about an issue I have with it, is that it's not available natively in different languages, but you can change your system language and it will translate. And I was like, you really need to make it available in different languages. So she said she would. So no promises. But within this is essentially a bunch of cultural institutions have got together and shared things. And what I'm going to do is show you something really quickly. Is if I show you my favorite painting, is obviously you could just go and do a Google search for Starry Night. But the reason I want to go through arts and culture and get to it this way is that this is taken with a gigapixel camera. So on your phone, you might have like 8 megapixels or 12 megapixels, whatever kind of camera you've got on your phone. This is a gigapixel. In fact, it's the same kind of camera that they use on the Google Street View cars. And what that means is that you can get to see beautiful things like this. Now, I was working at the International School of Brussels in last year, working with their French department, and we did a lot of work on descriptions of artworks. Michel Follon, if anyone knows, did a beautiful bunch of paintings of the universal human rights. And so we did loads of work on describing paintings and, you know, what's in the background, what's in the foreground, what colors can you see, what do you think might be happening. And I just feel like sometimes we underestimate what we can do with a little bit of language. And so, you know, you can get a beautiful painting like this, but maybe what you could do is when you click on it and zoom into it, because it's this gigapixel camera, you can even see cracks in the paint. So you can start to work with kids and describe this kind of thing here, and what do you see? And then maybe zoom out a little bit more, and that'll render in. And so you can see this amazing detail. And not only see the amazing detail of artworks, is you can also go and visit them in Street View. So if you click on View in Street View, it's going to take us to the Museum of Modern Art. And what that does is allows us to actually have a little look around the gallery. Now, I know you will be going on field trips for a little while. So this actually gives us that opportunity to do this, to actually see different paintings in context. So I can actually look at this beautiful, I think that is a Seurat, this beautiful, I think this might be this one, pointillism painting. And I can go around and, that's the wrong one, it's the Sleeping Gypsy, that's not the one I want. I can go around and find these different paintings. Here's a beautiful Cézanne. I lived in Aix-en-Provence for a year and a half and big fan of Cézanne. So I can then find out all about him. Now I know that this isn't in target language, but what we can do is be creative about how we can use target language, for example, to describe what we see here, what you can read about. Can we teach kids the language of I see, think, wonder? You know, those Project Zero thinking routines. What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? So we can visit cultural artifacts, and we can explore all this fascinating stuff through art and culture. But let's keep going. I am sorry that I am going through a lot of stuff very quickly, but I have always been of the opinion I would rather give you loads of stuff and you take one thing away and give you one thing and you're like, man, not for me. I'm in a very unapologetic mood today. I don't know why. Okay, so one of the other things which I've been really privileged to work on through the what's called GE3, which is the kind of educator advisory board for Google Earth, is Google Earth and Google Earth Voyages. So Google Earth, if you haven't used it recently, it is still, so Google Earth Classic is still a program that you download onto a computer. But when Google launched Chromebooks a number of years ago, and Chromebooks are really cloud-based machines, they're not really built to have a lot of programs on them. They actually did this to put it into the web. So this is the web-based version of Google Earth. Okay, so this one is in a browser. It also works as an app, and so if you use iPad and things like that, then you can download the app. Now, obviously, the first thing everyone does is look for their house. So that's good. You should always do that. So as soon as you start doing anything about houses, let's just fly. Here we go. This is where as soon as you do, and Joe has been, right, Joe? You visited. So as soon as you do anything about houses, you can get kids to have a little look. It's being a little bit slower. I'm sure it's going to be fine, and it's not going to drop out. So you can use Google Earth to explore. If you've never been to Melbourne, once we release restrictions. So if you want Joe to come and work in Australia, you can definitely do that via online. But at the moment, no one's getting that. But you can start to visit places and have a look around. And one of the beautiful things about it is you can also do it in, this isn't rendering very fast. My internet is being slow. But it will render into 3D. So as you can see, I live probably about half the train from the city. So the city's over here. And so what I can do, there we go, I'm flying across the city. What I want you to see is that this city is here. So it says add to project. This is a new feature. It's only been out for a few months from, or maybe a little bit more than a few months now. I've lost all sense of time. Is the ability to make your own Google Earth projects. Okay, so Google Earth projects are essentially Voyages where I can put in information, I can put in pictures, I can put in text. So this is what we're interested in for our students. And I can create something that looks a bit like this because there are a bunch of Voyages already created. So I'm going to, sorry, I'm just my time. Really need to go faster, and everything's being a bit slow for me today. But we've got a bunch of these Voyages built into Google Earth, so you can learn and lives and animals and stuff. But this is the good stuff. These are beautiful, and they're all in English, which is not helpful to me. However, what you'll see is there's a link here to a spreadsheet. It needs to be updated. It says 2003, which is wrong. I don't know why it says 2003 because Voyager wasn't even around in 2003. But this is a list of all of the voyages that are available in English with a direct URL. But then it also has next to it the French, German, still loading. French, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. I think there's a couple more as well. Hindi, Japanese. It has all of these voyages translated. So if it is only in English, you'll see it says only English, but otherwise it has the translations with the actual links to it. So if you want to use any of these kind of interesting voyages here in a different language, so it has a little description of what it is, and then it gives you it in the different languages, so you can get kids to explore Earth in the language that you're teaching them. So Google Earth is a beautiful, beautiful tool. It's just being slightly slow for me, as I said today, for some reason. Let me just take you to that Eiffel Tower. It's just a great way to explore. There is an Eiffel Tower bakery next to Melbourne Airport. I knew it was going to take me there. It all stuff. This is not where I want to go. This is just a bakery that makes pretty average croissants. That's not the bakery I want. I want actual one in Paris. All right, so now it's flying me off. Now, one of the awesome things about Google Earth is that quite recent, well, not that recent, there's been a bunch of 3D rendering put in. And what happens is an airplane flies back and forward, and it's one use of trigonometry that's actually real life. Is it uses takes photographs at different angles and then uses those angles to then to figure out the height of these objects, and then to wrap the photographs around them and actually visit places. And I know this is such a stereotypical thing to do, is to go and see the Eiffel Tower, and language is much more about than just France, and much more about much more than just Paris. I just like this one because it shows you how close 3D looks, because it's nice and high. I could have gone to Blackpool Tower, which is just as impressive. So we've got all these things in Google Earth, which is great, but this is still very passive. We haven't really got onto anything about creation. And that's one I want us to look at really quickly right now, is we can do something around creating maps. And if you use, let me just close some of these down, make sure I've got, try and reduce that bandwidth, because as I say, in Australia, our national broadband network is terrible, if you, in case you didn't know that. Is we've got, here we go, MyMaps. So in Google Drive, if you just go to add, so those of you who are on here probably are using Google or know a little bit about it, because otherwise you or want to know more about it. In Google Drive, you click on new, and that's how you make new documents, new sheets, new slides. But if you click on more, you can also make maps. Now, what this does, and I'll just pull one up here, is it, sorry, here it is it brings up this version of a map, which is all based on Google Maps data, so it's all up to date. But what it allows you to do is to add things. So you can add things like place markers, you can add lines. And what I've done here is I've just started to take one of my favorite French movies, which I used to study a lot when I was looking at things like immigration and refugeeism. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Welcome by Michel Jouret, which is a beautiful film. I won't spoil it for you, but this essentially is about a young man from Iraq, from Baghdad, who travels to Calais on foot. You find out this all before the movie, before the main body of the movie, and he wants to get to England by swimming across the channel. So what I did is a couple of things. Is I actually created a text. So what I'll do is, again, this is all linked. So if you click on Google Classroom, if you click on Google Classroom, it'll take you to a doc, which explains all about this activity. And essentially what I've done is, and it gives you links as well, is I've asked the question, this is a reading activity, why does Bilal want to swim across the channel? I've got an English and the French, and then the English translation. So I just wrote it based on the movie. And what I would normally is up the cards and get the kids to look at all the information, and then to make a judgment before we watch the movie, to make a judgment on why would Bilal want to swim across the channel. But what I did is because we went digital, is I've taken that and dropped it into a Google drawing as hexagons. So through Google Classroom, which I'm sure lots of you are using, is I can give each individual student their own copy of this, and then I can easily see it in Classroom just by clicking through. But what I wanted them to do is to take these text chunks here and to start moving them about and even color coding them using the fill menu. Like, you know, this is all about Bilal, and this is all about his background, and start getting kids to move these things around so they start to see the connections in the text. So I've chunked down the text. There's actually a lot of text in here. If this was on an A4 sheet, it would be very dense. But because it's broken up, and you could do this with really simple language, I'm getting the kids to answer a question. Why would Bilal want to swim across the channel? By getting them to move and create these groups. So they're reading for a real purpose, and their answers will look slightly different, which I think is really exciting. And what this is, the level of language in here is certainly aimed at kind of, you know, year 11 upwards, maybe year 10 upwards. No, maybe year 9, I'm feeling generous. The students are encouraged to use this language to then answer the question, to sort of pull all the chunks out of here. But what else we did is we went on to make a map, and we used MyMaps to say, well, this is Bilal's journey, and we just took the text out of the reading. We said Bilal is 17, he's born in Iraq, and he's from Kurdish origins. Click on here, the Trajet de Bilal, the distance between Baghdad and Calais, as the crow flies, is about 4,000 kilometers. One of the things which is cool in MyMaps is when I click on this line, you can see it actually tells me how long the line is. And in fact, it's 3,948 kilometers, so pretty close there. And then as I click on things like this is the swimming pool. This is actually a scene from the movie, because if I drop a pin, so I'll just drop a pin here for now, I can put into text. So you can imagine the other beautiful thing about this is it's collaborative, so students can actually work on maps together. Is I can edit this by adding in an image or a video. So I was already looking for Bilal welcome, so maybe just grab that one there. And I can create a beautiful kind of interactive map that students can put their text into. So not only are they kind of retelling a story or whatever it might be, but also they're doing it in a much more creative way. And again, because it's Google, is I can share, and I can get the link where anyone on the internet with this link can view. And in fact, I put that link, I think, here. So you'll be able to jump on that map and view it. But I could change it, that you could edit it as well. So we can get students actually creating, and literature is a great example there, Sandra. It's a really, really good example of that when you're doing literature studies, to put it in place. And again, you can do these collectively as a map, but also put a great assessment piece. Maybe I don't get the kids to do a big, long writing piece, but I get them to create a map, and within each of these blocks, within each of the, not that one, within the rest of these blocks, they do some writing there. It's almost a paragraph per place. So there's so many creative things that we can do with using MyMaps. One thing that people don't always know is that if you go to maps.google.com, so normal Google Maps, is that you can, I realize we're seriously running out of time, is that you can click on maps, and you can also click on your places. This is normal Google Maps now, so the one you use to navigate. And actually all of your maps that you create in Google My Maps are still there and available and viewable. So if I click on Bilal's map, it has these different areas here. Again, I can change it to satellite if I want, but I can also grab Peg Person here, drag Peg Person off, and then actually go to Calais. I should have zoomed in a bit, I think. But I can actually drop Peg Person, and I can then have a street view. This is not the most exciting street view. It's very, I think it's typically French. Oh, actually, it's not all that French at all. But this is a typical street view. So I can actually explore my map through street view. So whenever you pick up Peg Person, whatever is blue is you can actually drop on that and use it for street view. It's really interesting that there's not all that much street view in Germany. That must be a legal thing. I don't know. I didn't know that about that. Anyway, okay. Last thing, and the beauty about the last thing is even if you have to go now, and I apologize for this, for putting too much in. If you do have to go, don't worry. I built a tutorial website, and I'm happy to demo it. By the way, Joe, if you want, so people are happy to hang on.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. If you're happy to demo it, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
if that's all right.
Yeah,
can I just ask, with the MyMaps, can you embed videos and audio in addition to images?
So the problem at the moment with MyMaps is you can only embed YouTube. Now that's on the roadmap to be changed, but there are a few other things which are happening behind the scenes, which mean that it's not super high up on priority list right now. But yeah, so at the moment it's YouTube, which isn't ideal for schools, obviously. But yeah, that's definitely there to come in. And again, if you want to do that, it's just a case of hitting add image or video. You've got web camera, image URL, your photos, Google Drive, and then more, you've got YouTube search and YouTube URL.
I see.
So you can drop that in, but only via YouTube at the moment. And that is, yeah, I'd say it's on the roadmap.
So if you had an audio file that was saved in Google Drive, you couldn't add URL. That wouldn't work.
It hasn't got a built-in player. That's
Okay.
the problem with it.
Okay. Thank
There
you.
isn't a built-in player. As I say, at the moment, it's one of the big asks that we've got. But
And with the YouTube clip, would it work if it's unlisted, or does it have to be public?
as long as it's unlisted, yeah, as long as it's not private, it's fine.
Okay.
Unlisted is fine. But the where more engineering energy is going is actually into Google Earth. So I think probably in the near future we'll see more of a fusion between Google Earth and MyMaps. So creating more stuff within the Google Earth interface. So I don't think MyMaps will never go, but the more engineering time is definitely going into Google Earth at the moment. All right, but the last thing, which I do want to just, I'm happy to share, and as I say, if you have to go, there is a link here to, there's a link here to a tutorial website which will step you through this bit by bit. So a good friend of mine, Donnie Pierce, he made some videos, so I've just stuck them into the website, a Google site here, and it has all of the things that you need to, you literally can just follow these instructions and even give this to your kids. I've given this to kids I've worked with, and they've smashed out some amazing tour creators. But essentially the last thing we're going to look at is this VR, so virtual reality tour creator. And if Rosemary's still on the call, she'll know how hard I find it to say tour without saying tour. That's a good Geordie. But tour creator, and no one in Australia understands me when I say that, is for you building your own 360 immersions. And it is honestly so easy. It's painfully easy, and I don't know why more people aren't using it. I think one of the things is people think, oh, it's VR, so I need to have a VR viewer. You actually don't. This works great on an iPad. It works great on a screen. If you've got touch screens, it's even better. And if you've got a Google Cardboard or a VR viewer, then it's fabulous, but you don't really need it. So, I was messing around with looking at some really classic kind of French topics, and I just threw this one together really quickly. One of the things this is how we essentially build a tour creator is I think I've got feedback, Joe. Cool. I was messing around with looking at some really classic.
Do you need to wear headphones, Chris? Is that the issue? Oh, you've got headphones.
It's not me.
Right. I'll just mute everyone's audio, see if that makes a difference.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, cool. So essentially, to make a tour, it's really simple. So let's do Tour de France. So you do actually need a cover photo, so you'll have to put an image in there eventually, but let's not worry about that right now. If you're going to once you're going to publish, and it allows us to street view. And I just saw a really good question from Lucia, and thanks for answering that, Joe. Yeah, the Ricoh Theta cameras are good. I think also there's the I'll find it for you in a moment, but there's the 1X, which is actually really good as well. I've got Theta and the 1X, and they both. I think the 1X is a little sharper, if I'm honest. But you don't need this. This is what I'm going to show you, Lucia. This is Lucia's in Melbourne as well. Awesome. Oh, we'll have to have coffee. So this is you can do a couple of things. You can look for places. So if I was to look for Aix-en-Provence, for example, I can add a scene from Aix-en-Provence, and you'll see I've got my little peg person here, so I can drag the peg person around. This is actually in the church. I can drop in. Now, what you can pick up are, and what we saw in Germany, and thanks for whoever put in there, yeah, Christina, thank you, about there's not very much in Germany because they don't want you to take photos of them on the street. What you will see is you also get little blue dots, which mean that there are photospheres that people have put in and have published to Google Maps. So as I pick up the blue thing, all that is a mixture of Street View and also people's photographs. So this is Place d'Albertas, which is gorgeous, not far from where I used to live actually. Now if I want to use that scene, I just click Add Scene. So it's really simple. It pops it into this view, and so even though I'm not looking at it in the VR viewer, I can still actually get quite a cool experience just by moving it around. And this is the really important bit. Now, it's still, I think this is still in its infancy in lots of ways, but what I can do is I can actually record ambient audio, or I can record scene narration. And what happens with scene narration is when you move into this scene, this narration will start, and you'll be able to talk over the top. Now, in order to do that, you actually have to upload an MP3. So Joe, it made me think of like the olden days when we first started using Audacity and stuff like that to record our MP3s, is you do actually need to record an MP3. I find the quickest and easiest one is onlinevoicerecorder.com. And there are tons of options for this, by the way, but this is just my preferred one. Online voice recorder is literally as easy as allowing my audio. Bienvenue à Aix-Provence. And I'm like, am I happy with that? Yeah, I'm happy with that. And I'll just save it. So you can clip it and things, but it's as quick as doing that. And then I can save it, so Aix-en-Provence. So that's the important bit, is it doesn't record directly into Tour Creator. You do have to record it in MP3 first. And again, that link is in this little website tutorial. And then what I can do is I can add narration or scene narration. So select an audio file. Just looking for it. No, called one crap. That's a bit rude. Here we go. Example. So I can listen in here. You're going to hear that because I'm not showing audio. I'm going to add that. So now what happens? Scene narration will automatically in one. But then what I can also do is I can add what's called a P or I, which is a point of interest. It's really cool, I think. If I add a point of interest, I have La Fontaine. I can't type tonight, it is late on Friday. And I might do a description of that point of interest. But the next thing I think is really cool, I can also add an image overlay. So if I wanted to find an image of La Fontaine, de Place Albertas, I think it was. Let's see if I can find one. No, but I can, here we go. So I made, like, for example, here we go. I like this. I should not be using them because it is a good image, and I should be showing how to be a better digital citizen. For the sake of time, I am going to download this one. I'm going to save this image, and I'm going to just save it as La Fontaine. Save. That's saving down in my computer. And now what I do is I'm going to select an image here, and it's going to add this as an overlay. Now, why I really love this is that you can do things like find historical photographs, and you can actually have, this is what it looks like in modern times. I've done some work with some history teachers, and we really enjoyed that. This is what it looks like in modern times. This is what it looks like now. And again, you can move this around a bit and kind of set it. You can also scale it. So you might have a small photo or a really big pop-up photo. And what that does is that it looks like this. And then as you come across, and if you're on a computer or an iPad, you click and that will pop up. Or if you're in a VR headset, you're actually using it in VR on a phone, you can click using the little clicker on the top of your Google Cardboard, and that will pop up. Again, what else is really cool about this is that I can add something which is called sight narration. And sight narration is that it will only trigger the kind of speaking when the photo is triggered. So I can add that sight narration. I won't bother recording a new file. I'll just use the same file. And that will allow me to have in situ dialogue. So when we're talking about doing
Hopefully we haven't lost Chris. Oh. I'm sure I'll come back in a moment. Oh, here we are. You're muted, Chris. Oh,
Am I back?
yeah.
Whew.
Do you want to, yeah.
All
Do you
right.
want to share your screen again?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what I did.
Don't
I
worry,
got
it's
over
fine.
the
It's
side.
probably system resources, isn't it? I'd have thought.
I am on my Pixel book, so it's normally pretty good, but
Okay.
might be just having a moment. It's Friday afternoon, Friday night. All right, so this is one I threw together. And what we did is we found a margin exports. And then just put, if we're doing food vocabulary, just pop in the photos there and add some narration, which again, I'm not sure you won't be hearing that probably, but that's me doing narration. So kids can be doing exactly the same thing. So just making your role plays, your vocabulary based things a little bit more interactive and 360. And again, these are really easy to publish and share. And the last thing I want to show you, which I really do think is a powerful tool, is that if I come back onto the website here, is that you don't have to use just photographs. What I've got is just on, I don't know why I put on another page, but I did. If you click on the template on the right-hand side here, it took me a long time to figure this out. But what I've got here is a Google slide. And so if I were to click on this link to make your own copy, I probably don't know, I've already got a copy of it, but anyway, I'll open it. What this does is it's going to give you the weirdest looking Google slide in the world. And the reason it's weird is because the format, the size of this slide is incredibly important. Because what we're going to do is we're going to create our own virtual 360 kind of image. And what we could do is, as you'll see here, I've got some images which you actually need to delete eventually, but leave them there for now. Essentially, anything that you put in between these two lines here, where it says eye level and in between area of distortion, is going to be viewable from within the 360. Where it says area of distortion, anything you put there will be, funnily enough, distorted. So what I tend to do is I'll get a box. So Joe, I know you wanted to go nerdy. We've gone like hyper nerdy here, okay? So we've got maybe a gray box.
I love the hyper nerd. It's great.
We are hyper nerding out now. I'm going to put another box here, and the important bit is I can't put anything in the area of distortion, because if you imagine the 360 image we're going to create needs to be folded into a globe, so it becomes 360. Then all of that waste, that gray stuff, is actually going to be folded to make the globe. So the only stuff that we can really see is here. So what I could do, for example, is I can do a search the web for image, and I might be doing some vocabulary, and I might be doing, let's say I'm doing something about sports. So let's say, for example, the foot. That's how we're going to go with football. Well, I'll do. Brilliant. So let me grab this image, and I'm going to drop it in. And normally what you would see is actually, it's a huge image, which is great. I'm going to put that here. Now, just to give you an idea about how big this is, so if I actually go into File and Page Setup, it's 108.37 centimeters by 108.37 centimeters. So it's huge. And if you put a text box into this file, if I started typing here, this is font size 14. So you can see just how big the actual slide is. So you do need big, good images. But if I put that one there, and then let's put in, for example, the tennis. No, I'm using, my brain's not working well enough to come up with better ideas. But basically we're using some great images here. And let's put this one there, and let's just leave that for now. But I could fill this up. I could also put text in. So if you wanted to do a grammatical presentation, you could actually put it in here and then put it into 360. I've got this, I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to download as a JPEG. So that's really important. So just create whatever I put in between those lines is going to be fine. I create that as a JPEG.
So when you say text there, Chris, do you mean a text box, or do you mean an image with text in it?
No, I can do a text box. In fact, I should have done that actually, but I just need to put up the size. Can I just say, Joe, the thing that made me happiest about 3 weeks ago was when they brought in the increased font size buttons, plus and minus. I was so over the moon. I didn't have to guess how big it was, but I can put actual text in as well.
Okay.
But you could even do like conjugation, parts of a verb, whatever you want to do in text form. So you could be as creative as you want. I've downloaded that. And if I just go into I'll just use this one, my market one. if I add a scene, rather than using Street View, what I'm going to do is click on Upload, and I'm going to actually select a 360 or a 180 image, which this, strictly speaking, isn't, but I've fudged it so it is. And I'm going to open that. Now, it'll look terrible for a moment, so it's like, oh, that looks rubbish. But once I add that scene, what you'll see is that becomes my 360 image. Now, if I look up, can you see where I put the gray before, where the area of distortion is? I look down, that's the area of distortion. There's not a lot I can do about that. But what I've got here is all these images. So now what I could do is I can actually put in some image overlays, and I can put in some narration on top of that. So it doesn't have to be 360 images that you've taken yourself or you've taken from Google Street View. It can actually be images you create yourself using the template there. I went 18 minutes over, Joe. Sorry, man.
No, that's great. But we couldn't see the text there. Why was that?
Because I had exported it before.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I mean, if you wanted to do that, it's as simple as like, if you do a version of this with some text in it as well, it might be like just, I mean, this is probably not the best, but you know what I mean. So once I export that now, and I kind of want to get rid of that as well. Once I export that, and it needs to be much prettier. So file, download, JPEG. Anything that's in that narrow kind of line there will be then transformed into a 360 image. So add a scene, and you can be super creative with this, right? And also, one of the things when I was in Brussels, one of the things which was exciting is we took the students' work. When we did Furlan, so we actually studied this artist, and then they did some paintings themselves, which I love. When we did that, we took photos of their work and we put that into 360. Right.
Wow.
So, you know, they can, and they narrated over the top saying, talked about their work. So there's so much, such a powerful tool, so much you can do with it. And then it's as simple as, so I've been doing a lot of work in Papua New Guinea, which has been really fantastic. And I visited some schools and I recorded audio, and I used, you know, slightly more, I spent a little bit more time on there, but what it essentially let me do was, it let me take these photographs, and then, and again, you're not going to get this, but I recorded a school song. They were singing the school song, and things like being able to go and visit the science labs and interview students. So I interviewed some students, why they chose science, and then essentially, this is what the science lab looks like in one of the schools. This is one of the best schools in Papua New Guinea, by the way. And then when we click on here, it brings up the students, and then it plays the audio. I asked them the question, why did you choose science? So it just gave the Australian schools I've been working with the opportunity to kind of meet virtually their students and find out why they studied science. So there are tons of applications of Tour Creator just on its own. And then they're all publishable, and they publish to the web. If you open them up on a phone, you can use them in Google Cardboard. So there are absolutely tons of stuff you can do with them.
Amazing. You know, the template you just showed us, have you included that within the presentation, or if not, could you?
The template
for the 360 image that you showed us with the grammar text or the image.
So on the Tour Creator tutorial, there's a page there. But if you go to the top right, I don't know if you managed to open that. There's it says template, but I mean, what I can do is just chuck it in the chat as well. So if
thank you, Chris.
I shouldn't say Chuck, but I will put it in the chat as well. So copy link address. And so that's a direct link to it. It should force you, and this is a good here's a hyper nerdy trick, is if you change the end of a URL, a Google Docs URL, instead of saying edit, and you change it to copy, it'll force copy. So anyone who clicks on that link, it'll say, do you want to make a copy? So rather than them messing around with mine.
And that works with any Google tools, doesn't it? Like Jamboard or Google Presentations, anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I have not been watching the chat, so I apologize. If there's anything I can do to help.
I think I've answered all the questions in the chat, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in now. But thank you so much, Chris. That was as inspiring as you always are, but particularly at this moment, I think, again, people are going to be going, watching the video again, I'm sure, and then making their own Tour Creator examples, MyMaps, and all the rest of it. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Can I add my thanks on behalf of everybody, and thanks again to Joe for talent scouting all of these people. Of course, we all feel that we know Chris. I've just had a message from Stephen Fawkes, who is saying he's sorry he wasn't able to be here. So a special hello from the Northeast from Stephen Fawkes to you, Chris. We've got to do this more often. I mean, obviously everybody's in touch on Twitter, but again, that's been, as you said right at the beginning, what a lovely positive thing to this very sad time, that we're just reconnecting. And I know we do it by Twitter, and Joe, you've got all of these followers and you've got us all together, but this really is a plus, isn't it? Being able to see you, and
the challenge with
amazing that you are there in Australia apologizing about something being a little bit slow. Well,
that's very true. That is very true.
I'm old enough to think this is all magic.
I love Twitter, but what I found, honestly, is that since I've been in Australia, is I'll get up in the morning and then look at stuff, and because of the time differences, it's actually it's so much harder for me to follow MFL Twitterati things. So I have to be very deliberate. We're in the same time zone, you'd be like, all over it. But so it's just beautiful to be able to see your lovely faces and to hang out with you. So I'm very happy to come and hang out again at any point if you want.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Well, this has worked really well, hasn't it? I mean, we've had a lot of people, and I know a lot of people do sign up knowing that they can't come, but they know that by signing up, quite rightly, they're then on the list, and so they will get the link to be able to see everything. So really, if ever we have sleepless nights, we can get onto Twitter and we can have a little chat with you. Is that it?
Exactly right. Exactly right. All right. Well, good on you. Thank you so much, team.
Well, thank you so much.
I'm going to go and have some dinner. And
you have some dinner. Some of us, I know that some people had to go to have meetings. I've got a meeting starting in 10 minutes as well. So, but that was just great. Thank you.
Enjoy that, Helen.
Picture of everybody though. Picture.
Oh, do you want a picture?
Oh yeah.
All right. Anyone who's here who's not too shy, because you're not shy. We're hyper nerdy and proud of it here, as Jonathan
nerdy.
I think
Hashtag hyper nerdy.
Yes, we're proud, and there's Mike as well, and all these people. Great. We're going to see you, Jonathan. It's lovely to see people as well. People who come to our conference, and then hopefully next year we really will be able to see each other in the flesh as well. So, and there's Tim. Great. And Jonathan. Do you know, someone commented that often the boys are all together, but that hasn't actually happened here. But sometimes all the men seem to be grouped together. Here goes. I'm about to take a picture.
Okay.
So,
big smile.
Big smile. 1, 2, 3. And I'll take 2. There we are. There's 1. And I'll do another one. 1, 2, 3. Great. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Chris.
Lovely.
Okay. Whereas normally I leave this going on forever, I think because I've got a meeting in 10 minutes as well. We will have to sort of close it down now, but thank you ever so much.
Enjoy your Friday night, Chris. You've deserved it.
Well,
thank you. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mom.
Bye. Yes, and is it Anjali or Anjali? It was lovely. At particular points when he was talking, I saw this smile come on your face. I think we want to have people with their videos open all the time.
It really brought everything to life, didn't it? Seeing
Yes.
things in 60 like that. I loved it.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Really, really good. And quite a brave thing to do as well, I feel, live, to be doing things. And but
Oh, yeah, definitely.
it was lovely to see him.
Thank you
Okay.
ever so much.
So I'm going to close it now because I'm going to be demonstrating class notebook now to a group. So lovely.
Thanks very much. Cheers, then.
Thank you. Bye then. Bye, Karima. Bye, Barbara. Bye, adult learning. Okay, you are an adult learning. That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah.